Hello everyone, welcome back to Tina Teach Django for tax looping database. Okay, now that we're done with if and else, let's move on to for loops, which is everywhere to be honest, in Python, in JavaScript, in well, not HTML and CSS, but for loops you can find it in any programming languages. So this is what we're going to dive into. This is the basic syntax of a for loop with Django for X in available members. Obviously, available members must be available to whatever file this code is on in views.py file. That's the only way we can access that model to be able to use the first name, last name, as well as join date. And when you're done with the for loop, don't forget and for. Like with most, code block as well, you end it with and for. Now let's move on to data from a model. When we get data from a model, they come as a query set object. Okay, a query set object. What it is, what it does, is different properties. We're going to dive into that in a future lesson. But for now, let's just go with, as is, query set object, like a list with dictionaries. Okay, so it's one dictionary after another. You can loop through these in a database using a for loop. Now, this is an example. For X in available members, our data model, with the first name, last name, join date, and phone number. Then we have X ID, X dot first name, X dot last name, and then N4. What this is going to do is it's going to loop through all of the first name, all of the last name in our available members model. Now, looping in reverse, which is very easy to do. If I move back and forth like this, you can see the only thing that's been added is the keyword reverse. It's very straightforward. You simply need to put reverse and it'll loop in reverse. Now let's move on to empty. Empty is a keyword that can be used if you want to do something with an empty object. Okay? Or you can use it to excuse an object that does not exist or an object that is empty, basically. Now, we have an unordered list for X in empty test object, okay? So this is the same thing as available members. However, we have not defined this model. We have not defined this object whatsoever, so it becomes empty, no members. This is going to return no members. All right. It sort of functions like an if and else, is it not? It just has a for loop at the front, and the for loop becomes the true condition, and the empty becomes the false condition. Now, instead of having an empty object, basically means there is no instances of this object in our file whatsoever. There's no name, it's not like we wrote it out and then we have the assignment symbol and then nothing, okay? So there's just nothing whatsoever, no mention of it. But what if we have my object and we wrote my object over here equals, and it's just empty, okay? What would that happen? Well, it's basically the same thing. Django's gonna go with the empty section over here, and it's going to return no members. All right, as simple as that. Now let's move on to loop variables. You can see that there's a lot of this. However, if you group them together, okay, except for this, group them together, you only have 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're very simple. These things are just opposites of each other. Okay, so you don't need to remember much. For example, for loop counter at 1. Okay, 1 is the default. This is what we're working with. For loop counter, it is 1 by default. Unordered list for X in cakes, we're using a different one instead of available members. For loop counter, it is set to 1. Now, if you want it to set to 0, you just say for loop counter 0. Okay, it's very easy to remember. A lot of them are just opposites of each other. For loop first for the first iteration. For X and cakes, missing this list item. If for loop dot first, style background color yellow. Okay, and then X, and we have N4. So I made a mistake of putting all of this code before the sign of the list item. That's my bad, okay? I'll double check it way better next time. And we end the unordered list. For loop last for last iteration. Once again, for X in cakes, if for loop dot last, style, background, color, yellow, and then we have an if. Now we have ref counter. What is ref counter? The current iteration, if you start at the end and count backwards until 1. This is what it looks like. For loop dot ref counter. All right? And then for loop dot ref counter 0, the same thing, but counting backwards until 0. All right? Now, for loop ref counter 0, you can see the only difference between being ref counter is 0. If it's until 1, then we just get rid of the 0.
Over here in the views.py file, I'm just going to change this into names. And let me just delete this. So we have names, right? Meredith, Johnny, and Jessica. This is what we're going to be working with. Over here in template, I have for X in names. I'm going to go in here. And let's have H2. And then X. Close the H2 tag. And N4. Alright. N4. And then we can copy and paste this in order to reverse our output. I just need to put in reversed.
Mai con kêu con đang ghi âm mà cái microphone nó có thể ấy được mọi thứ đó.
And then let's move on to empty objects. Okay? I'm gonna scroll down. For X in empty object, we're not gonna mention this anywhere whatsoever. List item X dot hobby, for example. And then close the list item. And then we're gonna have empty. List item, nothing at all. And then, as you know, we have N4. Okay, now we're gonna go for loop counter. Let's go ahead and go up here. Copy this, go down here, paste it down here. So for X in names, and I'm going to replace this with list item, closing list item, and over here is for loop counter 0, so it starts at 0. Copy this, paste it again, remove the 0, so it'll start at 1. And then let's move on to for loop first and for loop last. All right, we have a lot to go through. For X in names, list item, okay, and then let's go in. We're gonna have, let me close the to symbol first. If for loop dot last, style equals to background color. I'm going to make it yellow so it's easier to see. And then, oops, and if. I'm gonna fix the formatting a little bit. Now let's go down here. Okay, there we have it. We're gonna have X and then close the list item and N4. N4. Now this N4 should be moved backwards. And we're going to do the exact same thing. Copy and paste this, but make it first. Gonna make this one first. And then all we need is ref counter, which I'm going to go up here. Copy. Paste. And then for loop ref counter. Let's scroll down. Copy this again. This ref counter starts at 1. We want it to start at 0 for this time. We want it to start at 0 for this time. So I think we basically have everything now. Let's see how it works out. I already have my website running. Okay, my server running, sorry. So first off, for X in names, print X. We have Meredith, Johnny, and Jessica in the exact same order over here. And then we move on to reverse, where we have Jessica, Johnny, and Meredith. Very straightforward. Now, for X in empty object, there's nothing at all. Nothing at all, as you can see here. Now, for X in names, for loop counter starts at 0, 0, 1, 2. If it's just counter, then it starts at 1, 1, 2, 3. Okay? For X in names, for loop last. So this takes the last one, which is Jessica, and make the background color yellow, which it did. Jessica is yellow. Now, for X in names, for loop dot first, it takes the first name, which is Meredith, and make it yellow. Therefore, we have Jessica and Meredith consecutively. Both are yellow. Now, let's move on to ref counter. It starts at 1, right? I'm sorry, my bad. It goes back until 1, not start at 1, because the start at 1 is the counter. My bad. Reverse counter, ref counter, 3, 2, 1. Now, reverse counter to 0, 2, 1, 0.
Now that's it for today's lesson. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, learn today, better tomorrow. The next topic is going to be comments, okay? And I have the Buy Me a Coffee link down in the description. If you're willing to support, I would really, really appreciate it.